Hey everyone, DreamingSunTide here. Hope you're all doing great. And lately, I've been wondering, how important is defense in Monster Hunter Wilds? Look, I know how a lot of people have been talking about how Monster Hunter Wilds is too easy, but I for one kept triple carding against Zoshia, and AT Ray Dow is coming up, and I suspect that guy's going to be super hard, so defense could be very important. I think it's also pretty important because things like Weakness Exploit or Agitator, these offensive skills, only seem to boost our offense by about like 1%, 2% per point. So if defensive skills are much better than that for survivability, maybe they could be worth slotting in instead of more and more offensive skills. That is what we're going to be talking about today. So the outline of this presentation / video is going to be first, we're going to talk about how defense and monster damage works. Then we're going to talk about what skills are important for defense or for comfort, and what set bonuses we might want to use in our builds. And then we're going to go through some example builds and talk about some good armor pieces and overall sets. Okay, so let's go. Let's start first talking about defense and monster damage. So, the monster damage we take is going to be decreased depending on our defense value, and the value that it's decreased by is what we see on screen right now. Basically, we multiply our damage by 80 divided by 80 plus our defense. We'll get to what that means in a second. More important than damage reduction, though, in my opinion, just for understanding, is what I might call effective HP. Basically, that means we're going to think instead of how much damage we take, how much we survive. Basically, if we take half damage, we're going to survive twice as long, right? If we take a third damage, we'll survive 3 times as long. So to calculate that difference, we just go 1 divided by the damage reduction, or in other words, what we see on screen right now. Our effective HP multiplier, what we multiply our HP by to get our survivability, is going to be 80 plus defense divided by 80. So let's go through some examples, because that might be a bit. So normally, Mega Barrel Bombs are going to do 75 damage to the Hunter. So if I place a Mega Barrel Bomb right now, my defense is 1 and my HP is 150. I'm going to hit the Barrel Bomb, it's going to explode in my face, and I'll lose just under half my HP. So we can see that, and if I place a second one down, I will be basically gone. Sweet. And now any tiny hit will defeat me. So let's place down a small barrel bomb. And yes, I am going to a cart now in the training room. Now, if we increase our defense, I'll take less damage. So if I increase my defense to 81, the survivability, my effective HP is going to change by almost double if I increase my defense by 80. So let's do that. So this set I made earlier has 81 defense and no other relevant skills. So if I place down my 2 Mega Barrel Bombs, instead of taking all of my HP, I should only take down half my HP. So let's go, let's take out this one. Boom, that's 1/4 of my HP down. And the second one, boom, that's half my HP down. And 2 more Mega Barrel Bombs and 1 more small barrel bomb and I'll be defeated. So basically, our survivability is going to be 80 plus our defense divided by 80. And we can use this to calculate how much we'll survive any hits. So for example, if we wanted to survive 7 Mega Barrel Bombs, we'll need just over 200 defense. So that answers the question in my Python video, if anyone was still curious about that. 201, or slightly higher because a rounding defense is what is needed. Okay? Okay, so now you can all rest in peace. Well, rest in happiness. Or you can be happy if you got the answer now. Okay? Okay. Now, I created a plot quickly just to show how much effective HP really changes with defense, and that should be on screen right now. So, the main takeaways is that effective HP increases linearly with defense. So the more defense you have, the more effective HP you have. But what's important is that this plot does not start from 0. So that means that doubling defense does slightly less than doubling our effective HP. So what I mean by this is if you look on this plot right now, when I have 100 defense, my effective HP, or my survivability, is going to be something like, 2.3-ish? And if I double my defense to 200, my survivability is only going to be around 3.5. Okay, I doubled my defense, but I did not double my survivability. Meanwhile, if I double my attack, I'll double my damage, right? So there is this slight adjustment, but increasing defense is always good. Now, I think the easiest way to think about this is to imagine we just always had an invisible plus 80 defense, okay? A plus 80 defense that's unaffected by anything else. So before, I went from 1 defense to 81 defense, all right? I multiplied my defense by 81, but I only multiplied my survivability by 2. However, if you think about our effective defense, as I was saying, we just imagine we always had a secret 80 defense. So instead of having 1, I had 81, and instead of having 81, I had 161. So my defense multiplier was not 80, it was 2. And my effective HP multiplier was also 2. So speaking about this on the plot, so when I say 100 here, I really mean about like 180. Double 180 is 360, and 360 minus 80 again to go back to remove the secret defense is 280. So if I go from 100 defense to 280 defense, I will, again, double my effective multiplier. Okay? So basically we just always imagine we have a secret 80 defense, and then the entire formula simplifies out and we can very easily see how important defense is. So, what does that mean in practice? Right now, if you fully upgrade your armor on an endgame build, you'll have around 370 defense on screen. So we can treat that not as 370, but as 450 like real defense. And so if we get 45 more defense on that, we're increasing our effective defense by around 10%, which means we increase our effective HP by around 10%. Okay? So 45 more defense is 10% more survivability for a normal late game build right now. That'll increase later on, but for right now, that's more or less our guideline. And so I think that sort of helps us conceptualize how important defense is. So right now, if we start off with 450 effective defense, or on a normal weapon around 225 raw, that means a point of raw is going to be worth about twice as much as a point of defense. So raw is very important still. Especially if you think about, like, the realities of the game, right? Say every minute we have a chance of carding, we have like a 5% chance of carding, right? If we double our damage, the hunt will go by twice as fast, it'll last half as long, which means we're going to be less likely to cart in a hunt that's shorter, right? So more offense is a good defense, but more defense is also good defense in itself. So we want a good hybrid between offense and defense in our builds. More defense is also a good defense. And it's important that, defensive skills are generally a bit easier to stack than offensive skills and may have stronger multipliers. So it could be worth trying to get that hybrid between offensive and defensive skills. Stack the most efficient defensive skills, stack the best and most efficient offensive skills together, and you get the best of both worlds, right? So, let's start talking about these defensive skills then. The most basic one is going to be defense boost. Okay, so in reality, this thing has quite a few things to it. So sometimes we get a flat bonus to our defense, sometimes we get a multiplier to our defense, and sometimes we get elemental resistance as well. The main interesting thing, though, is that we can get through 1 slots, which are very easy to get, and there's not really many offensive skills that compete with this, other than, say, antivirus, if you use Gore Magala sets. But it has very little competition, and right now there is a defense boost 4 talisman that we can slot in. Later on, I highly suspect they'll introduce a defense boost 5 talisman, which will be even better. So it's very efficient and very easy to fit in. So, I created a plot of how much damage reduction you get for different levels of defense boost, compared to different levels of critical boost, just so we can visualize roughly how effective it is. So this is sort of the worst case scenario for defense boost, when the element resistance is not going to be useful at all, so against an enemy's raw attack, versus the best case situation for critical boost, when you have 100% affinity. So what you can see is that until around level 5 for both skills, they're very, very equal, but defense boost can fit in 2 more levels. It can go all the way up to level 6 and 7. That, and it's so much more easy to fit in, right? For crit boost, you're comparing with other skills like offensive guard, or attack boost, or critical eye, or whatever weapon-specific skill you may want. For defense boost, again, you're competing with antivirus, which is good, but not as good, and, antivirus only sets up to 3, defense boost stacks up to 7. And this is in the best case and worst case scenario for them. So, in general, as you can see right now, defense boost does change effectiveness depending on each level. Crit boost is always useful per level, but defense boost sort of gets stronger and weaker at certain levels. The main things are defense boost is very strong at level 3 and level 6 if you're fighting against monsters that only use raw attacks. If you fight a monster that uses element attacks, you have the updated graph on screen, and so levels 4 becomes also really, really strong. So here is a plot of defense boost versus crit boost in more realistic situations. So if monster using an element attack, and your critical boost is only around 80, your critical hit rate is only about 80% instead of 100%. So in this case, once you get around Defense Boost 3, Defense Boost is actually stronger than Crit Boost, which is crazy. Crit Boost at level 5 is only going to increase your damage by about 10%, but Defense Boost at level 7 is going to increase your survivability by more than 20%, and it's so much more easier to fit in. So, yeah, the main takeaway here is that Defense Boost is very strong after around level 3. Levels 1 and 2, not really worth it, but 3, 4, and 6 are so good, and it's so much more easier to fit than offensive skills. So yeah, Defense Boost is good. However, part of what makes this skill so good as well is that it gives you some element resistance. And so, we should probably think about element resistance as well. So the element resistance formula is that our damage reduction is 100 minus our resistance divided by 100. And so our effective HP multiplier is 100 divided by 100 minus our resistance. Again, let's plot that, and that should be on screen right now. Now, surprisingly, this is a bit more complicated than the last one. It's no longer a straight line. It's a plot that increases as elemental resistance increases. In other words, the more resistance we have, the more valuable more resistance is. Resistance always gets better the more we get it, while defense was always the same value. Resistance gets stronger over time. That's point 1. Point 2 is that a point of resistance is always better than a point of defense if a monster is using elemental attacks. Another thing is that once you hit 20 resistance, you become immune to the monster's blight, which is really nice. You know, you aren't going to get dragon blighted, you aren't going to get fire blighted. That more or less increases your damage overall. So resistance above 20 is usually very much worth it, and the more res we get, the better it is. Which means that the element resistance skills are very important as well. So let's go to those. So there is one skill for every element, and there are 5 elements. So fire, water, ice, dragon, and thunder. And so at levels 1, 2, and 3, it gives you 6, 12, and 20 elemental resistances, which is really good. So again, that's going to reduce the damage you take by around 20% for the monster's elemental attacks. And usually, the elemental attacks are the monster's strongest attacks. Not always, but because of that, it just means that elemental resistance are usually a really, really good option. In addition, at level 3, it gives you plus 10 defense. And how good's plus 10 defense? Well, like we said, all we do is add 80 to the comparison. So we go from 370 to 380, or in other words, 380 plus 80, or 460. So 460 divided by 450 is around 1.022 times. So we get around a 2% survivability increase against raw attacks from getting defense boost 3. Well, sorry, element resistance 3. So we get 20 element of resistance and an additional 2% survivability against all attacks as well, which makes elemental resistance 3 usually a really good option if they can use elemental attacks. So yeah, both res and defense are very useful. There's one more thing that could be useful as well, and that's healing. So, healing. I think I divide healing into 2 main types. I would say you can do active healing and passive healing. So active healing are things that need a dedicated action, like using a potion. And active healing gets better when you do things like have the skill speed eating, or quick sheath so you can put your weapon away faster to heal more quickly. Passive healing are things that are automatic, or they just happen through things that aren't, taking a direct action. So things like recovery speed increases passive healing. Things like the Arkveld set bonuses are a type of passive healing. Things like the Sheathe set bonuses are a type of passive healing. And there are strengths and weaknesses to both active and passive healing. And stuff like recovery up boosts both active and passive healing. So some skills boost both. So, I think the important thing about active healing is it takes time, but it's what we need to do when we get hit by a big attack. If you're only on 10 HP after a big Mizutsune tail slam, we aren't going to wait for our health to naturally increase. We're going to stop, we're going to run away, we're going to drink a potion, and then get back into the fight. So active healing is really important when we're in trouble. Passive healing is very good against weaker monsters, since it can let us avoid active healing at all. And so we save time, we improve our damage. The problem is, against harder monsters, we don't want to rely on passive healing. We don't want to, wait for our health to naturally cover if we're almost gone. So in my opinion, active healing is much more important than passive healing. Passive healing is very nice on offensive sets and stuff like that, but active healing is much more important when the whole goal is to make sure we don't card. And so I want to try and optimize active healing, not passive healing. Now, I know people might be upset by that, but that's what I want to do here. Maybe I'll touch more upon passive healing later on, but for now, let's try and optimize active healing. Okay? So, how do you optimize that? Basically say we're having trouble in our fight, and we're drinking a mega potion every minute. This takes around 5 seconds or so to put away the weapon and then drink the potion again. If we could somehow cut our healing time down by 1 second, then that means instead of being down for 55 seconds, we're being down for 56 seconds. We gain an extra second, which means our sort of damage uptime increases by that value, 56 divided by 55, or 1.8%. And 1.8% is a lot. Like, that's comparable to offensive skills like Weakness Exploit or Agitator. So, Speed Eating is genuinely really good for damage uptime. I released a quick video on Speed Eating the other day that shows the comparison, so Speed Eating is good. So healing every minute, Speed Eating does about 1 to 2% damage increase per level. If you could fit Mushroomancer 3, you can heal up with Mandragoras instead of Mega Potions, and that's a 4.7% damage increase because our healing time goes way down. Problem is, it's a 2-slot, so it's hard to fit in 3 points of Mushroomancer. Quick Sheathe 3 could be an option, but it's not very good unless they're using a weapon that needs Quick Sheathe 3 for offense. In terms of like healing downtime, it's about 1% at best. Not really worth it unless you're using the longsword. Maybe the greatsword if you're doing a mean crit draw build. So yeah, so for active healing, Speed Eating is the best skill you can use for damage uptime and survivability. Now, another interesting defensive skill is Divine Blessing. So Divine Blessing is a protection jewel, and thinking about how effective it is for defense is genuinely a bit complicated, and I feel like it'll be controversial no matter what I say. Basically, its effect is that you have a chance to reduce your damage. You have a 25% chance to reduce your damage by 15, 30, or 50, depending on the level. So on average, we can take our damage reduction and divide that by 4, multiply by 25%, and say our damage reduction on average is 3.75, 7.5, and 12.5. This is good. Like, this is comparable / better than defense boost or element resistance. It is arguably the most effective defensive skill if you think about it on average, right? But you can also think about it in terms of how, like, the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is that it can prevent a card. It has a 25% chance of saving you when you would be carded. So that means at level 1, at every level, it is a 25% survival increase. And if you have 3 cards, and you have a 1 in 4 chance of it activating, on average, this skill will save you in the hunt. It will give you an extra free card. So arguably, Divine Blessing is even better than it is on average. On the other hand, if you never rely on it, all it really is a reduction in healing time, right? So, yeah, if you think about it like that, it's not very good, but I think the best way to think about it is just on average. On average, 3.75, 7.5, and 12.5% damage reduction at the respective levels, which is really good. I think it's a reasonable defensive skill. So there's that. There are other skills that are worth thinking about for defense and comfort. So Earplugs, Tremor Resistance, Windproof, and Mind's Eye are all really good attacks that let you avoid some of the enemy's attacks. However, most weapons have ways of dealing with these already. You know, the longsword has counters, the lance has shields, and whatever else. And so, since no enemies can chain these into a knockout yet, unlike in GU where Mizutsume can deflect you and then one-shot you, or Diablos can roar into a one-shot, I'm going to ignore these for now, but feel free to use them yourself. Feel free to slot them in. The following builds that I'll talk about later have so many free slots, so you can fit the ones you want here. I just don't think they're generally recommendable. Same thing with Evade Window and Evade Center. As with previous skills, they are nice to have, and they also come in for free on some sets, especially Gore offensive sets, but they're very skill dependent and probably shouldn't be relied on. And if you can rely on them, you're probably good enough to not need a defensive build, okay? So we're not going to talk about these ones too much. So those are the main single skill points. However, they're not of defensive set bonuses that are worth discussing that we're going to talk about. I'm not sure how important many of these are. So the most defensive one is Gravity's Protection, or Flawless Armor. So this one gives us the damage reduction when we're on max health. which is nice-ish. The problem is we take so much chip damage in this game that we aren't going to care about it that much. It's not going to be really useful many times, so let's ignore that one. Uthuna's cover, or Protective Veil, is, in theory, really, really strong. So with 2 pieces, it gives you plus 25 defense. With 4 pieces, you get plus 50 defense, and 12 resistances when we have a mantle up. So having mantle uptime is usually pretty hard, so this skill wouldn't be active very much, especially when we need it. So while in theory it's nice, in practice I don't think it has uptime issues. It's not going to last for very long, so we'll ignore that one too. There are some really good healing ones though. So these other set bonuses work really well for passive healing. So Arkveld's Hunger heals you with continuous attacks after you keep attacking the monster enough. Guardian Arkveld's Vitality, or Decimator, heals you on breaking wounds. So if you break a wound, you get a whole chunk of health back. And Zoshia's Pulse gives you Super Recovery, which gradually recovers your health even if it's not red. So that way, all of these, in some sense, reduce you from needing to stop and heal, but oftentimes you want to do those anyway, so they aren't recommending them that much. Of these, my personal favorite is Guardian Arkveld's Vitality, or Decimator, but Arkveld's Hunger is often a bit easier to fit in. The main big set bonus, though, is going to be Fortify. So I released a video on this earlier. So Fortify is a set bonus that you can get from alpha parts from Konga, Blango, Dosha, Ajarika, Arkveld, Mizu, and Mumifida. And how it works is that when you cart, you get 10% extra raw and 15% extra defense up to twice, and it stacks multiplicatively. What that means is if we cart twice, we get a 21% raw bonus and a 32% defense bonus. And what's really cool about this skill is that we can cart on another set and swap to a set with Fortify and get the full Fortify bonus, which means you can use any other set for your first cart, and on your second and third carts you can use a defensive set or an offensive set with Fortify to improve both survivability and your damage. And because there are Arkveld parts that have Fortify, you can fit Fortify in with the Arkveld set bonus for more healing as well. Blango is also really nice for damage. Blango gives you Warcry, which means that when you do your emote, you get plus 3 roll for about 3 minutes to everyone around you. So Fortify is very, very strong. Okay, so let's put that all together. In general, when you're trying to make a defensive build, our general principles are going to be try and get Divine Blessing 3, try and match element of resistances. So if a monster uses fire, you get fire res 3. If a monster uses thunder, like Ray Dao, go thunder res 3. And try and get defense boost 6, because that's when it's most efficient. If we can, get to 7, but 6 is our good baseline. For weapons, Zoshia weapons are good in general, because they have the skill White Flame Torrent, which grants a great flat bonus to damage, so it doesn't stack with anything else. It's a nice one-slot wonder for damage in general. So if you can use a Zoshia weapon, use a Zoshia weapon. Now once you have those, you can go with normal defensive skills, or get your last one defense boost, or get Speed Eating for faster active healing. To actually get that, what I would recommend is you try and use a Suja Sash Alpha waist piece. So this gets Divine Blessing 3 as well as great slots as well. So I have that on my defense build. So you have the Suja Sash, so Divine Blessing 3, 2, 1, 1 slots. To get this, you need to trade for Suja Textiles with Sekka in Suja, so get that. You can also use your Defense Charm 4 to get 4 points of defense, which is very nice. We may probably get Defense Boost 5 in the future, which makes this even more efficient later on. And general principles are that since your affinity probably won't be too high since you have so much defense, Razor Sharp is going to be better than Master's Touch, and Crit Boost is nice, but no longer necessary. Sometimes Attack Boost is going to be better. So, with that in mind, let's start talking about the builds. So these builds do lose damage. They lose around 10% damage. But in exchange for losing 10% damage, you gain 35% more survivability against raw attacks, which is really good, and over 80% against element attacks. And the element attacks are usually the most deadly. So we're getting over 80% survivability in exchange for 10% damage, which can be a very good trade-off if you're struggling to survive. In addition to that, we get faster heals, and we get Blood Immunity. So if these are things you want, use these builds. So let's finally talk about the builds. So what we're going to do is going to calculate optimal builds based on two things. Based on our survivability and based on our damage. Whichever has the highest of both multiplied together is going to be what we recommend today. There are going to be 3 sets we recommend. We're going to recommend a first initial defensive build. Then we're going to recommend a Fortify build. The last build is going to be Fortify with the Arkveld parts, because the Arkveld parts give a passive healing skill in haste and recovery while still letting you fit in Fortify. So we'll have a build that has both Fortify and the Arkveld set bonus. Now personally, what I think I'm going to do is I think if I struggle with a monster, I'm going to start off with my full-on offensive set, okay? And if I can beat the monster, I'm good. But if I'm struggling and I card once, I'm probably going to switch to my Fortify set. My survivability will skyrocket, and my offense isn't going to decrease by that much, because Fortify is going to improve my damage as well, right? If I card again, both my offense and defense are going to go way higher as well. You can do the same thing, but if you like the Arkveld pieces, you can use that instead for even more passive healing. So yeah, let's talk about the sets right now. So on screen right now should be our normal recommended defensive set. So this set follows a lot of the principles we were talking about before. We have the defense boost Charm, and we have the Suja Sash to give us defense, high defense boost, and high Divine Blessing from the Suja Sash. In fact, we're stacking our defense up to defense boost 7, we're getting Divine Blessing 3, we're filling up 1 slot to get element resistances, but we're still getting a whole lot of really good damage skills. We're getting Agitator 4, we're getting Counter Strike 3, we're fitting in Max Smite 3 as well, and we're getting Wildfire Torrent for huge damage. And we're even fitting in a Point of Burst, which is great as a 1-point wonder. In addition to that, since we have 2 numinous pieces, we're fitting in Super Recovery 1, so we get some decent passive healing as well, even if we didn't optimize for it. Now, if we get a defense 5 charm, that means we don't need one of our defense boost decorations, and so we can put in another point of speed eating to get speed eating up to 3. Right now it's on 2, which is very good, but speed eating 3 would be even better. So yeah, this is a nice, good defensive build. If you do this, your defense is going to be way high up, and you should have element resistances up to like 40, 45 after you eat. So yeah, really, really good, and you shouldn't struggle to survive against AT Raidao if you use this build. And will have good damage as well. Now, after you cart, you want to switch to this build instead. So this build is actually completely different, surprisingly enough. There are no parts in common, which is part of why I recommend making this build instead, because armor spheres are expensive. So here, using the Blango Helm Alpha, the Mizitsune Coil Alpha, and the Blango Greaves Alpha to get Fortify. In addition, we're using the Ray Sandmail Beta and the Udra Meyer Braces Beta. It's important to note that in the last build we used the Meyer Braces Alpha, and here we're using Beta. The slots just worked out that way. Now, in this case, right now, we're going to get up to Defense Boost 6. If we can get a Defense 5 charm, we can get up to 7. So, Defense Boost 6 for now. We get that. We still get Divine Blessing 3. We still get Element Resistance 3. We still get Speed Eating 2. We even get, like, wide range as well if you're playing in multiplayer, which is nice. And you card in multiplayer and your friends aren't too angry to kick you out. But we still get nice offensive skills. Counter Strike 3, Max Smite 3, Agitator 2, Burst 1. So, yeah. Oh, and remember, this set gives you Warcry from having 2 Blanco pieces. So remember, this set, if you use the 2 victory emote, you get +3 raw, which is very nice. Now the final set we'll come up with is a slight variant of the last one, which uses some Arkveld parts to get you haste and recovery. Not super recovery, the other set has super recovery. So this set has haste and recovery and so has a bit more passive healing, but in exchange loses speed eating, so you have a bit less active recovery, but it's still good. This set also uses 2 Blanco sets, so you can still 2 victory. So specifically, this set uses the Blanco Helm and Greaves Alpha, the Arkveld Braces Alpha to get Fortify, and the Arkveld Mail Beta to make sure you get Haste and Recovery 1. Also with the Suture Sash to get all of those sweet slots, and Divine Blessing 3. When we get a Defensive 5 Charm, we can also fit in some Speed Eating for a bit more active healing as well, while still getting some great damage skills like Counter Strike, Max Smite, and whatever else. Some other quick notes, so with all of these skills, I have slotted in Max Smite 3. I know not every weapon can use Max Smite 3, so feel free to arrange this as you want. This is more of a guideline than anything else. And if you can use a Zoshia weapon, swap to an Artian weapon or another weapon you may like, per what your normal optimization is. But don't bother too much with Crit Boost. If your affinity is too low, Crit Eye can be good. You might want to go Crit Eye 3, Crit Boost 3, for example. It's weapon dependent. With that being said, these are my summary conclusions. So offense is a good defense, but defense is also a good defense. So yes, try, if you're having trouble with survive, get more defensive skills. To do that, if you want more survivability, get Divine Blessing via the Sujo Waste, get Defense Boost via the Charm, and try and get element resistances via slots. And try and get Fortify if you can't. But remember, don't neglect your offense entirely. So if the hunt goes by faster, you have less chance to die, offense will help you survive as well. So try and get both of them to clear your hunts as easily as possible. Now, with that being said, I thank all of you so much for watching. I'll get all my Patreon supporters as well, especially Jack Beam and Lumavolt, who are my highest Patreon tiers. If you want to join them, please do. And yeah, again, thank you so much for watching. Good luck with AT Ray Dow if you're watching this video before that. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.